All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. I'm really glad to be able to be here. Eric, thanks a lot for creating this opportunity for me. Um, as you can see, we're going to be discussing how to improve persistence with socially relevant instruction. And I'm going to take you through some of the research done here by the New England Literacy Resource Center and do that kind of briefly and then drill down a little bit more deeply into the relevance part of it. So that's how this is going to work. The description says that we're going to be talking about voting, from voting to food, and I actually switched that up a little bit since my previous webinar focused a little bit on voting, and I believe that's archived. If you want to see that, Eric can point you the way. So I'm changing the topics a little bit here. And Eric, I noticed that my screen froze again, so
Oh
I
no.
can't actually move the slides. There's something about, I know, right? Let me try this again.
Okay. And I will mention here in the beginning that we, as we always do, we're going to be sending out a PDF of the PowerPoint. So, take notes as you feel appropriate, but you don't have to copy everything verbatim. We'll be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint along with your certificate of participation.
So I won't see your hands and I won't see your questions, but as Eric just said, he will interrupt and let me know if anybody is asking a question or making a comment. So please feel free to do that at any time. You're going to hear my voice a lot, but I would really like to hear your voices as well as we go along. Here's the basic way the hour is going to be structured, just so you have a sense of how to pace yourself. And here are the 4 objectives that I have for this webinar. That you learn the 6 key drivers of persistence, and these are the ones that were developed by the research done by the New England Literacy Resource Center. That you see some activities and teaching strategies that nurture persistence, that you learn about how leveled text can address some of the persistence drivers, and that you become more familiar with the change agent as a source of relevant materials. We're going to start with a little participatory activity. And what I have up here is the instructions for how you would do this in the classroom. And if you like the activity, maybe you could try it in the classroom and see how it goes. It's a good community builder, I think, and it's a good way to get people thinking about persistence. So what I want you to do, since you can't work it with a partner when we're on a webinar, but you can just do this on your own. And that is open your wallet or your backpack or your purse or whatever you have, the place where you keep your stuff. And find something in there that is a symbol of how you persist. So you can get creative with this. This doesn't have to be completely literally a symbol of how you persist, but a symbol. A symbol is symbolic. A symbol is figurative. A symbol is something that makes you think about, what keeps you going, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and what adds drive to you when you feel like you might be stumbling a little bit or getting low on motivation. What keeps you hanging in there day after day? So just take a second and look through your wallet. Maybe if you're sitting at your desk, maybe it's your desk drawer. I don't know. And I'll see if Eric, if you could use that chat box and just list your item and maybe just tell us why it helps you persist.
Okay. Right. And I'll also I'm gonna jump in because one of the things I always tell my students at the university is when we ask students in our classes to take compositional risks, when we ask them to share what they wrote or share a drawing that they did, I think we as teachers have to be willing to take that compositional risk as well. So I never ask my students to do things that I wouldn't be willing to do. So in that spirit, I'll let you guys know that the first thing I thought of is pictures of my children, which are at my desk. But in terms of my wallet, one thing that I found that really kind of helps me persist is my library card. I love going to the library. I love knowing that there's books there, that there's DVDs there, and that I'm part of a community of people that go and use the library. So on my desk, it's pictures of my kids. In my wallet, it's my library card. I feel like helps keep me going. Carol mentions pictures of her family. This is a very popular thing. Terry says pictures of her family helps give her focus. Sarah says pictures of her 2 sons, and they keep her going whenever she's facing something tough. Kathy says her whiteout pen, that it reminds her that nothing need be forever. That's very cool.
That's lovely.
Barbara says her phone, and she stays in touch with her grown kids by texting. Right, that's why
Hmm.
everybody texts nowadays.
Hmm.
Christine says a list of books that she would like to read.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
cool too. Robert chimes in with the library card too. He says he can't go anywhere without it. Didn't that used to be that was a slogan for some company that you can't go someplace without it, but it would be nice if it was for a library card for everybody.
That's great.
Okay.
Those are wonderful. Yeah, if more people show up, you can let me know, Eric. But I just want to say, if you do decide to do this activity in the classroom, it is a really nice piece of it is that people get into pairs and do it together. You know, it makes people laugh a little bit to have to pull out their wallet. It makes people kind of chuckle to be rooting around in their backpack. And then a nice thing is if you ask the partner to share what they heard, not what they themselves found in their backpack. So the person should share what the other person told them about. And then that way you're kind of someone in the class is shining a light on somebody else in the class. And it's just a lovely experience. You know, a person feels seen and heard, and a person is sort of talked about and noticed. And, you know, everybody doesn't have to go. You could just take a few. But it gets people warmed up a little bit thinking about the topic that you're about to get into. So that's why I shared that activity with you here today, both to hear from you and to get you all warmed up about this topic of persistence, and also to just model an activity that you could bring into the classroom.
I think that piece of advice holds for many activities, that you do in the classroom rather than someone always responding for themselves. I think the idea that you have to listen to somebody and then share, I think is a really good strategy generally.
Yeah, and it actually, you'll see how it connects to one of the key drivers of persistence, which is community and developing a sense of belonging. And when you have activities like this, it really does develop community in the classroom and a feeling of belonging. Okay, well, thank you all for being willing to dive into that activity. I'm going to have a few more places during the webinar where I ask for your participation, so be ready for that. I'll give you a warning as we get to each one of them. All right, so here I've been mentioning that the research was carried out by the New England Literacy Resource Center, and they wrote this book called Making It Worth a Stay, and this is available for free download at the Persistence website, and I have the web address right there. So you can jot that down, or Eric said he'll be sending out the slides, so you'll get it. You'll have a chance to get that web address again. And there's some fantastic information in this booklet, and I really hope that people have a chance to look at it. I'm going to share a little bit more of the kinds of resources that are available on this website. First, I want to just mention the 6 main drivers that the research found were key to nurturing persistence in an adult education program. And they're these 6: that feeling of belonging that we were just talking about, clarity of purpose, which is a lot about, goal setting and about teachers being clear about what the purpose of the lesson plan is for the day. A sense of agency in the students. So this is opportunities for students to show leadership in the program, for them to feel like they're in charge of their own learning. Number 4 is competence. So students need to experience mastery as they go along. It doesn't have to be diving straight into the deep end, but little by little, like baby steps of mastery. So yesterday I couldn't do this, and today I can do this, and tomorrow I'm even better at doing this, and then the next day I learned yet another thing and another thing. So just creating opportunities for students to feel like they own a skill. Number 5 is relevance, and that's going to be the key driver that we're focusing on in this webinar. And then finally, stability. So that covers things like, do you have managed enrollment in your program, or do you have open enrollment? So under open enrollment, you have people coming in and out at all different times. That can kind of create an unstable environment. I mean, I know sometimes programs have to do it that way, but it does create a little bit of instability. Students, not being able to get to class, students not having resources for childcare and things like that, that creates instability as well. Also, teacher turnover is another ingredient there. So what I'd like to do is show
Or
you,
Cynthia, before you move on,
yeah,
Thomas had a question about whether all of these were true for both ABE and ESL. Does the research show any difference in terms of those populations when it comes to persistence?
no, no. They're joined together. The research was of both types of programs.
Okay.
So just going down now to my desktop to show you this adult learner persistence website. Let's see. This is what the top page looks like, and you can see that one of the great resources here is this program self-assessment that people can, if you click on this, you get to a PDF that you can easily print out. It's about 10 pages long, and it lists all the drivers. So you see the first one there is sense of belonging, and it gives you a chance to self-assess, from 1 to 5, how well your program is nurturing this driver. And for sense of belonging and community, there's about 10 or 15 strategies here, strategies for building a sense of belonging. And so you might be doing really well on one strategy and not so well on another strategy. And going through this document will help you identify places where you might like to try to improve. Or you might just get reinforcement that something you're doing is a research-proven strategy and you should keep doing it. So this is a very handy document. I'll scroll down a little bit more so you can see here's clarity of purpose, lots of different strategies for how to bring clarity of purpose into the classroom and the program. It's not just for teachers, but it's also for counselors, for program managers. There are a lot of things that happen outside the classroom that are relevant to persistence, like what does a student see when they first walk in the door? What's the orientation like? Is there an open house that gives good information about what to expect in the program and things like that. So scrolling down further, you'll see all the drivers here. There's relevance, competence, and again, a number of strategies that you can rate yourself and pick a few. I recommend don't pick a lot. Like if you actually do put yourself through this process, just pick one or two that you might take away and really decide to work on. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew and give yourself something really impractical to do. But out of all these, maybe you'll find a small handful that you would like to work on. Okay, so, and then if you have time to peruse this website, you'll see lots of different strategies. You'll see the researched documents that back up those strategies. You can read in more depth about them that way, and a very rich resource. So I want to just kind of launch that at you and let you come back to that whenever the time is right. And what I want to grab your attention for here for this webinar is the relevance strategy. So let me scroll forward to that, and I found this great cartoon. I'm a teacher too. I've stood in front of the classroom many times and looked at a sea of faces, and I could tell from the slouch in the chair or the blank expression on the face that the thing I was going on about just felt highly irrelevant. But as teachers, it really is helpful when we can teach basic skills in the context of material that is really interesting and engaging and relevant to adult learners. And adults have a lot going on in their lives. There's a lot of relevant topics that if we could find them and teach within them, we'd be not only teaching basic skills, but would be sharing relevant information and giving relevant perspective to adults. So I want to, before I go any further, I just want to ask if you could use the chat box here to say, what do you think is relevant to your adult learners? In your experience, what are adults interested in hearing about, and what contexts are most useful to them?
And I think this is open to both ABE and ESOL classes, right? You're thinking about ABE broadly understood.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Arlene says training programs, employment, childcare,
Mm-hmm.
Robert says overcoming their timidity to converse in the language. Employment.
Mm-hmm.
Current events.
Mm-hmm.
Employment. Dealing with family issues. Current events in the community. Learning to speak better English. Okay, so a lot of employment, community affairs, immigration. Kathy notes her students are concerned about the fastest way they can get through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jay notes that many want to know how what they are learning is related to getting a job or employment.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So some consistent concerns.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Okay. Well, I jotted that list down as you were saying them. I think we are going to cover quite a few of those as we go through. Thank you for that, everybody. So I want to just launch straight into this article right here, which I picked, honestly, I have to say, because this is a New Jersey student, and I thought, let me get started with a New Jersey writer. This guy was a student at Trenton Area Soup Kitchen. Does anybody know that program? I don't know if I can't really see your answers, but I'm assuming probably some of you do. And he wrote this great piece for the food issue of the change agent, which is about how, you know, his family, his parents, even though they were on food stamps when he was growing up, his parents provided really healthy food for him and his brother. And he describes the food here. I think this would be really engaging for a lot of our learners. They would see a picture of a learner right here on the page. They would read his bio and learn that, you know, he's also enrolled in a program. And then the story probably would resonate for a lot of our learners. He goes on to say that after his parents passed away, he stopped eating healthy food and he gained a lot of weight because he found it was easier to eat at fast food restaurants than it was to cook for himself. Another thing that I think many learners would feel like they have that in common. So many of our students are working multiple jobs, and it's just really hard to find time to cook. Over time, he got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and he goes on to talk about those problems and how in the last few months he's been trying to change his eating habits. And he's been attending a diabetes group and a nutrition group, and he's got his sugar under control, and he's shopping at farmers markets and grocery stores now and trying to avoid McDonald's. So there's kind of a whole storyline here that I think learners would find really relevant on a lot of different levels. And for this story, I created an activity. This is in the food issue of the change agent, and usually I do create activities to kind of go with most articles. But here you can see the number of different directions that you could go to teach basic skills, starting with just a piece that just is engaging and interesting just because it's something that people could relate to. But that's not the end of the story. Then, you know, to add to it, we have these kinds of extensions. So the first one is, how did fast food affect the author's health? What did he do to regain his health? Now, for this question, the learner has to go back to the article and find out what the author really said, which some of you might recognize as a college and career readiness skill. You know, that's a big emphasis these days in the CCR skills, is to use evidence, to not just say what you think, but to say what the author is saying, and then to show evidence for how you know that that's what the author is saying. So that first question builds that skill. Then there's this prompt that you could research the history of fast food and find out how it became so popular. And so now we're sending students off possibly to use technology, to use the internet, to look things up, to think about how they might want to present their research. Maybe they would want to create a PowerPoint, maybe they'd want to grab images and with little captions, maybe they would want to write an essay. They would need to cite their sources, you know. So again, you are building up their basic skills, but you're still rooted in this article and this topic that's pretty high interest. There's another article in the same issue of the Change Agent. Actually, wait. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to come to that one later. I'm getting ahead of myself here. But it's on page 29, and I'll show you a picture of it on the next slide, I think. But it's by a fast food worker, so it's by somebody who works in a fast food restaurant. Here, let me just flip forward to that. Yeah, here it is. This is a really interesting piece by somebody who's been working at McDonald's off and on, she says, since she was 16. Now, that's something that, again, many of our students are probably working in fast food places, or their children are working in fast food places, or their brothers or their cousins. This is going to be a common thread. And her story is one that I think is going to resonate a lot. And she happens to be active in a campaign to get the hourly rate for fast food workers up from minimum wage to something more like $15 an hour. So that's an interesting kind of opportunity for critical thinking, a chance to, first of all, realize people are out there fighting for something like that. Some people might not even know about that. You all mentioned that current events is something that is relevant to students' lives, so they could go looking for more articles about the fight for the $15 per hour wage for fast food workers and find out what's been going on with that. So there's a lot of directions that you can go, just starting with this article about food and about eating fast food. There's a YouTube video that I found, just 2 minutes long, called "The Faces of the Boston Fast Food Movement," and I gave you I think you can just search for it if you go to YouTube, you can search for it and find it. So now, again, the CCR standards are asking people to use multimedia and be comfortable, getting information from different sources and different kinds of media. So that way you are bringing in, something other than text. You're bringing in a visual and audio. We also happen to have a whole issue of the change agent dedicated to good jobs, not just any jobs, and that is another source of great articles written by students kind of putting out this question of, well, what is a good job? Is a good job one where you get paid a living wage? Is a good job one where you get some dignity and respect? Is a good job one with a career ladder? What is a good job? What do different people think are good jobs? How do I go about trying to get a good job? And so that is all wrestled with in that issue number 36 of the Change Agent. Another extension is this prompt, do you eat fast food? Why or why not? And here now you're just asking the student what do they think? What do they do? And you're just prompting them to maybe do a free write on what their habits are around fast food. And that free write could turn into a more solid piece of writing if you decide to go in that direction. There's this thing called this caloriecounter.com where you can look up the calories in different common fast food menu items, and so that might be an interesting thing if you're teaching math, or even if you're just trying to bring math literacy into your ESOL classroom. They say those keywords like just even plus and minus and equals, and those math words are important in an ESOL classroom, even if you're not teaching math. So these are some ways that, starting with a relevant article, you can really build in a lot of basic skills. You can address college and career readiness standards. You can start extending into thinking about the nature of work, and that can lead to this piece, which I want to share with you. Before I do that, though, Eric, is anybody asking any questions, or is there anybody who has anything?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of conversation. Kathy wanted to point out that from her extensive use of the Change Agent, she says that these articles really open up amazing dialogue and create what she says inspiration for the writing process. And I think that's a really important point, that one of the ideas here is that the articles and the extension activities can be a helpful part of your planning and getting the lesson going, but it doesn't mean that this is the entirety of the lesson. One of the questions that Thomas had was kind of what level are these appropriate for, and if a student is in a GED class and is getting ready for college and career readiness, that some of the articles in the Change Agent might not be complex text enough for students that are working at higher level academic reading skills. But I think the idea is that these articles could be part of a rich diet of texts in the class and not necessarily stand on their own. That the articles would highlight themes, highlight issues to get the conversation going. And then if your class is made up of higher level readers, or they have more demanding tasks in mind, then certainly you can supplement it with other things.
That's exactly right. Especially if they start researching stuff on the internet, they're going to find pieces written at higher levels. And I'm glad you mentioned the question of levels, because later on in the webinar, I'm going to show you, we've started leveling all the articles that are published in the Change Agent. So the last 10 issues of the Change Agent have all been leveled. And I'm going to show you how you can look up the level of an article.
Mm-hmm.
So,
hang on, Susan had her hand out. Susan, did you want to jump in here? Oh, maybe not. Okay.
Here's another piece that's about restaurant work, not necessarily fast food, but this is written by an ESOL student who talked about how he went from dishwasher to chef, and he describes something that happened to him that I think many ESOL students would have in common, and that is that, the manager would get angry with him because he didn't understand what he was saying. And I know when I've taught ESOL, this has been one of the most common themes ever, is students having to manage their manager's anger and the communication problems that happen. And so he describes what he figured out, and then there's this activity and it just asks, what would you do? So someone yells at you because you don't understand them. What did Elder do when that happened to him? What does the woman in the cartoon do? What can you say or do? Elder describes a difficult situation that motivated him to make a change. Share a time that happened to you. What questions do you have about how to move your career forward? Who can you ask? And then in the cartoon, the woman says, now I'm learning English so I can be more effective in this society. Before, when people yelled at me for not understanding them, I couldn't say anything. Now at least I know enough to say, hey, why don't you help me learn? So that's her strategy for, when somebody yells at her. And this would be a great activity in an ESOL classroom, for people to share at times when that happened to them or happened to somebody that they know. What did they do about it? What do they wish they had done about it? What would they do about it if it happened again? And you could get everybody sharing. This would be just a great vocabulary generator. You could do some role plays. You could get people up in front of the class. There would be some probably laughing, some embarrassment, some, coaching, horizontal coaching could be going on. If you don't have to always be front and center, right? You can kind of sit back and let them coach each other on, how to handle a situation. And it just could be a great time. It's also going to be addressing that driver that we talked about, the community building driver, and that sense of belonging and that feeling of agency. You might not be able to speak English well, but here are some things you can do, some ways you can be an agent in that situation and not just sort of feel like a victim who's silenced and can't speak. So, that story and then these activities are probably going to find a really strong home in our learners because it feels really familiar and they know what it's like to be there. I'm going to share one more of these, and then what I wanted to do was I wanted to ask you all how you might, in your classroom, build basic skills around these sets of activities. So actually I see I've got a couple of more that I want to show you, which I'll try to get through kind of quickly. Here's one where a student talked about how they had a big problem at their job. The bathroom was never cleaned and the cafeteria was never cleaned, and they were really upset about it. And she got together with some other women and they decided to talk to the supervisor. And after they talked to the supervisor, things actually got better. A very simple, straightforward story of a worker noticing something that wasn't working well at her workplace, talking to other coworkers about it, and doing something about it. Now, they don't always work out so well. We all know that, some people might not be in the position to take the risk of talking to a supervisor about something like this. Some people might. Some people might have suggestions for how to do it in a way that was safe. People might have all kinds of thoughts about this. She might not be an immigrant worker, so it might be a different risk for her than it would be for somebody else. And that's a great topic to just bring up in the classroom and have people share and talk about. And we have this grid underneath the article, list a problem, what can you say, and what can you do? And this is an opportunity to just fill out the grid from your own experience, or perhaps interview your fellow students and find out what's a problem that they faced. What do you think you can say about that? What do you think you could do about that? So another chance, and then this is just a small little grid, but you could build, you could build a big, on butcher paper in your classroom. You could put a great big, poster up there, and people could fill it in depending on the level of the learners. There could be pictures and vocabulary. It doesn't have to be full sentences. Again, it lends itself to role plays, and so we're just trying to find common problems that our students face, and then create lessons around them that help them both gain their basic skills, gain proficiency in English, gain proficiency in writing and reading, and feel like it matters to them in their everyday life.
Cynthia, can you go back to a second to that previous slide? And I think no, the next one, the chart.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I think in this chart, the idea of what can you say, for me, the idea is really treating the students' knowledge of kind of the social linguistic realities of English, as really something valuable. So when I've done activities like this with my students, when I say, what can you say, it's not some kind of like idealized world where, oh, if the boss is doing this or somebody's doing this, then this is what you can say and everything magically is going to get better, right? When we have discussions about what can you say also means what can't you say, right? And how do you have to phrase things, and how do you have to word things? And students will have really important insights about, as a worker in my company, I know I can't say this, or I know I can't say that. And having those conversations about language use, and not simply, okay, well, here's the phrase, I think really opens up a much, much deeper and richer conversation with the students. And everybody learns about how the language functions in use, and not just kind of a written down dry dialogue in a textbook.
Really good point, yeah. And depending on how advanced your students are, you could look up labor laws and things like that, which brings you into social studies knowledge, as well as ability to research and look things up and find out what legal protections you might have. Can you get fired for asking your supervisor to clean the bathroom? There might be labor laws around that. Again, you can't guarantee, you have to be a little bit careful, you can't guarantee to your students that the law is going to be followed at their workplace. It's not for us to say that they should do anything or that they shouldn't do something, but it's just we're opening up this way of looking at things. And like Eric said, we're opening up their knowledge and understanding and getting them talking to each other about what's possible. All right, so Kathy, I'm excited. One of the participants in the webinar here is Kathy, who teaches at the New Brunswick Public Schools, and this was one of her students, Mercy Mendoza. And I'm sharing this because it's just a wonderful piece by a wonderful writer talking about how she helps herself by volunteering. And I think a very straightforward piece to read, one that lends itself to students thinking about how they might also get involved in their community, partly to help and to have that feeling of participating in your community, and also because honestly when you work as a volunteer it can help build up your experience and build up your ability to get other kinds of jobs. So volunteering is a great way to build a career ladder for yourself if you can spare the time. So this piece gets the conversation started by putting up, the writer right out there front and center. There she is, and her bio is down there, so you see who she is and what her story is, and you can relate to it, and it's got that piece of relevance to launch you into the discussion of volunteering. And again, there's another grid, sort of like the other one. What are some ways you give time in the community? And the reason why I phrase it that way is because a lot of people think they don't do anything, but then once you start digging under the surface a little bit, you find out they do a lot. And they'll say things like, oh, you mean cleaning up at my church after social hour? That's volunteering? Oh, okay, well, I do that. Oh, you mean teaching Sunday school is volunteering? Oh, okay, yeah, I do that. Or, oh, taking in all the neighborhood kids, every afternoon when the school bus drops them off, that's volunteering. Yeah, that's volunteering. That's being really active in your community and and sharing your gifts with the people around you. So just naming some of those things is very empowering and very just gets people to notice all the things that they're doing and contributing. There's also in this grid an opportunity to explore, volunteer jobs that you might be interested in, just to get the person thinking about that as even an option. Even if you just did something once a month, that could open doors for you. And then an opportunity to think about ways that volunteering might help you. Maybe it's something good to put on your resume. Maybe it'll just connect you with people, get you to know people. Maybe you'll get to practice your English. Maybe it'll just make you feel good, I don't know. But, people get to think about that and generate their own thoughts and, just imagine the vocabulary that you could be coming up with and the research that could go with this. You could come up with a class list of places to volunteer in a 10-mile radius of your neighborhood. If you are interested in the resume building part, I reproduced this form that I found, I think it was in the Integrating Career Awareness curriculum, where you just get a chance to think about the things that you've done. And it's just a checklist. But sometimes, if you can't think of it yourself, you could get prompted for it here. Oh yeah, I've made phone calls for my kids' soccer team. Yeah, I've done that. So then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's a thing. I can put that. And then, you could be working towards helping your students develop a resume, which is a great tool for getting other kinds of work. So we've kind of shown, I think, let's see, what do I have? Yeah, so just to review, we started with that piece on the guy eating, unhealthy food at McDonald's too much and then getting sick from it, into a bunch of different directions about restaurant workers, dealing with managers on the job, dealing with difficult conditions on the job, volunteering, thinking of ways to take action at work. So we've kind of branched out in a lot of different directions, and I'm just wondering if you could use the chat box now, if this has gotten your imagination going at all. How would you build off of some of this material? First of all, do you think it's relevant to your students? That's my first question. It's a yes or no question. It's not the kind of question you're supposed to ask, but I'm asking it. You can just put yes or no in your chat box. But then if you wouldn't mind saying a little bit more, if you do think your students would find it relevant, how would you extend it to make it even more relevant? What basic skills could you teach in the context of this material? So I really would love to hear from you all about how you would bring this right down into the classroom.
Okay. All right. So Cynthia said you can use that question area. I'm actually in favor of yes and no questions sometimes. I think sometimes people are afraid of yes and no questions. But, when I'm talking to one of my kids and I want to know if they had candy before dinner, I don't really want an open-ended question, right? Did you have candy before dinner, yes or no? There's times when a yes or no question is completely appropriate and gets you the information that you need.
On that note, Eric, is anybody putting no for?
Carol's saying that she thinks it would be relevant in their basic reading and writing classes. Judy says she actually used this inventory in her classroom on Monday, and it opened up students' perceptions to things that they've already done and do contribute to their employability. She used this as a lead-in for tomorrow's activity to research careers of interest.
Great.
Okay. And Kathy says that her students really eat it up and that the articles strike a chord. And she said, truth be told, they asked me if we can read some of the articles together.
Great.
Thomas says that it's relevant to his ESL students, but some may not be as relevant to his ABE students. And those students are right before the GED class. So depending upon the student population, it may ring a little more resonant than others. Terry says that it gives students a chance to voice their interests. Arlene says she breaks up the class into small groups and have each group work on a different story, and that each group should apply the story to individual lives. I think that's true. I mean, not only for the change agent, but generally, the more students can have some choice and you can tailor some of the readings, the better off you are. Thomas, kind of as a side conversation, was speaking about how programs kind of require sort of uniformity across classes, to sort of have a central text, and then teachers can kind of supplement the text, but a lot of them have kind of this key text that they're supposed to work around. And this is one possible way that you can do that, that in addition to that central text, you can have these smaller pieces that small groups could work on. Ethery says that it's very relevant for her students, especially volunteering, and that they often volunteer in the office to gain experience in speaking. I think that's a really important point in terms of so much language learning and literacy learning happens outside of the formal instruction, and students don't necessarily realize that. Christine says the articles and charts will work well with her ABE 2 to 4 language classes, and that she would extend it by making up a hypothetical work problem and have students work in groups to come up with solutions. And that Terry says it's helpful to get them to understand things more in generally. And Kathy says that she teaches some GED students and they're relevant to them. And that maybe Thomas, again, has a concern about the complexity of the texts, and that you have to ramp up some of the text for the students that are really being pushed to deal with more complicated texts.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you all. Those are some really great comments. I really appreciate it. I think what I'm going to do is...
it's about quarter of, so...
What's that?
It's about quarter of the hour. So.
Yeah. I want to switch gears and just show you, because I think it was Thomas who was raising the question of level texts and whether the levels are complex enough. That's a really important question, and I want to just show you this resource that's available on the Change Agent website. So here's the Change Agent website. It's brand new. We just got this launched a few months ago, and one thing that you can find here is PDFs of all of our back issues. There is a fee for getting access to these back issues. It's $20 per teacher per year, so it's pretty cheap, but there is a fee associated with it. So, but once you pay that $20, you and your students also can get access to all these PDFs of all these back issues. You can see some of the topics there, including immigration, technology. There's the good jobs issue. We did this piece called Tales of Resilience. Many different diverse topics. There's our fashion issue, which people really love. So you can also get audio, and I'll click on the food issue and show you the table of contents of the food issue. If an article has headphones and is highlighted like this, you can click on it and you can listen to the article read out loud. So this is a way, if you have a computer lab and students have headphones, they can sit here and listen to the article being read out loud in small chunks, or they can listen to it read all the way through. So that is a way not just for teaching English, but actually for teaching all kinds of things. I mean, it teaches reading fluency and comprehension, and even grammar. I find that when people hear something read out loud, it teaches them what a period sounds like, what a comma sounds like, and then they get the feeling for punctuation via audio rather than via memorizing comma rules or something like that. And all of us learned a lot of our punctuation by that method. I don't know about other people, but I didn't really learn comma rules until I had to teach comma rules. I kind of understood comma rules more as a literacy thing just because of being a reader and stuff. So that's what this does, give a learner another way into understanding grammar. So if you look at this table of contents, you can click on the word level. It doesn't look clickable, but it is. And you can click on it, and it rearranges everything in the table of contents by level. So you can see we have a lot of, and this level refers to grade level equivalency. So you can see the grade levels do seem to cluster around, like I'd say 4, 5, and 6. But there are some 7, 8s, 9s. There's also a 10 and an 11. So if you're looking for that more complex text, you can often find it in the Change Agent, although we do tend to be more in that middle ground. If you really want to just find relevant pieces that are written by learners and that are going to be interesting to your students, you can go to this In the Classroom button and click on Audio Index with Article Reading Levels. You don't need a subscription to see this. This is available to everybody. And again, now this is a great big table of contents of all the articles from the last 9 or 10 issues. And again, you can click on level. And if you're like Thomas and you're interested in the higher level pieces, you can scroll all the way down until you get to all of your 9s, 10s, 11s, and 12s. And then you can find the pieces that are in that range and which ones have audio available and what issue they are in. So that's a resource that I wanted to share with you because many of us are working in very multi-level classrooms. We have students who are at widely divergent reading levels. And as we talked about competency or competence being one of the persistence drivers, when students have a certain transparency about what level they're reading at and they're able to see themselves progress, that can actually be really helpful. It might be a little depressing at first to think, oh, I'm only at a level 4. Oh, that's depressing. I thought I was going to be higher than that. That's okay. Like, that's just reality. And that might be something they have to sit with. But then they also get to see themselves progress and notice how their comfort level grows and how they've moved from the beginning of the semester when they were at a level 4 to the end of the semester when they're at a level 6 or 7 or something like that. And that is very inspiring to a student to see themselves progress and change. So
Cynthia, in addition to, I think, hearing somebody else read it out loud, Thomas chimed in saying that he has his community college students read their stories out loud, and that they're able to notice errors even if they can't maybe explicitly talk about the rules. They recognize, oh, that it shouldn't be that way. And then they can pick up some of these things. Oh, he's not saying stories, but paragraphs or essays. And I think that's true. And I think a lot of students don't know that simple strategy. Here at Montclair State, I work with both undergraduates and graduate students. And sometimes their writing is just not that polished. And I'll ask them, did you read this out loud to hear what it sounded like? And they'll say, no, why would I do that? And I say, well, because you want to know what it sounds like. And they'll come back to me and say, I had never really read my writing out loud before. Mm-hmm. And when I read it out loud, I could pick up, oh, well, this isn't a complete sentence, or, this doesn't seem to make any sense. So I think things that we sometimes take for granted as experienced readers or experienced writers, we have to let our students know about some of these strategies.
Yeah, and I have to admit that even being an experienced reader and writer myself, it's my voice that does a lot of the audio. You'll recognize my voice if you listen to any of those. I do the female voices, and one of my colleagues here does the male voices. But we often find that when we're reading them out loud, we notice mistakes in the text that the proofreader didn't catch, or that honestly, that I have to say that I didn't catch.
Yeah.
And I don't catch it until I read it out loud.
Yeah. Because we're so close to it, as Tom was saying, we're so close to it. Yeah. I mean, this is kind of more advanced, but one of the ways that I know that when I'm doing copy editing, and I sometimes when people are doing copy editing, they actually read things backwards.
Interesting.
Right? So rather than kind of reading it forwards, because you kind of get into the flow of the argument that you're so close to, you kind of read backwards up the page. You're kind of looking at the sentence just as a sentence, and kind of like looking at the punctuation and not get carried away with what you think you have down on the paper.
Exactly. Good point. I'll have to try that. Okay, let me, I know we're going to run out of time, but I just want to share a couple more little resources for you. People might have heard of this. I don't know if you know, the New York City Mayor's Office came up with this great website, the You Can Too website. And since it's just across the way for you all, it might be something that your learners would appreciate. It's a huge database of short videos by learners, and you can search based on ESOL students, GED students, Bridge to College students, all sorts of different ways that you can search for things and find learners talking about their experiences. And they almost all end with the learner saying, and if I did it, you can too. So that's the little theme that unites all the pieces. And the reason why I'm including it here is because it just creates this sense of community and this sense of other people are out there struggling in the same way I am. And it just adds inspiration, I think, because everybody feels so alone so much of the time, and so much like their struggles will never end, and they'll never get there. And it just creates this feeling of like everyone's doing it. Everyone's working on this, and people are making strides. People are taking steps. And so it's a great free resource that if you have that computer lab handy, you could share it with your students. So before we end, I want to just quickly breeze through this set of articles which are on immigration. And this is in our immigration issue. This wonderful piece by Raki Lee, it's a letter to her daughters, her 3 beautiful daughters who are in Senegal while she is here in this country working to support them. And it's just a beautiful letter. It's so sad, it's just heartbreaking that she can't be with her kids. And yet there she is smiling, there her kids are smiling, and she's very, she's just very loving and proactive with them, giving them parental advice. And so I feel many of our students are in some sad situations sometimes, but a piece like this just shows so much resilience and so much power and so much love that I think it's a highly relevant piece. And then the same idea, here's a young man whose mother was deported, and I think he was 15 when she was deported, and he stayed in this country and she had to leave, and he hadn't seen her for 3 years when he wrote this. So again, a really powerful piece. He says, Mom, ever since you've left, how come my white clothes are coming out pink in the wash? And he's kind of got these basic questions for us. Again, it's a little bit humorous, but also very touching. And the sad core that's in there is something that I think students can relate to. So the activity that for this, again, is helping students with their college and career readiness skills. That kind of, in this case, I have students write a letter to Raki or Jose, and in the letter to them, include responses to at least 3 specific details in their letters. Okay, so now if you were going to write to Jose, you would need to say something to him that showed specifically, that specifically addressed something he said. So that way you are having to show that you really read the piece, that you absorbed it, that you can respond to it. So maybe you might write back to him and tell him, well, how do you keep your whites white when you do the laundry? That might be something that a student could share back. And then what is this where, young people are still in this, some young people are in this country, they're undocumented, their parents are undocumented, they get deported, but the young person is maybe allowed to stay. This is actually a presidential, what do they call it? All I'm thinking about is decree, but that's not it. What is it?
Executive order.
When Obama was...
the executive order.
Thank you. A decree is something more like what a king would do, but
yes. That's what his critics would say. But yeah.
So here's the extension where you get to find out more about how the law works, what an executive order is. What is an executive order? A president just gets to sort of say something, and in fact, yes, the president, came up with this thing called DACA, which gave young people, here it is, DACA, young people under a certain age and meeting certain criteria the right to stay in this country, not necessarily a path to citizenship, but they can get a driver's license, they can go to school. This is something that would be highly relevant to many of our students. Some of them might not even know about this, or they might not know about it, or they might know about it but need more information. And so again, I'm going very quickly here, but this piece is meant to kind of launch you from starting at a high interest reading experience that's just moving and inspirational into more legal stuff, researching, understanding the law. You could even get into how government works, how the the executive office, what is it allowed to do, what is it not allowed to do, what's Congress's role. I mean, there's a whole way you can go there that's going to teach and add knowledge, in addition to basic skills of being able to read and write about this stuff.
And certainly with DACA, it's going to invite opportunities to consider different perspectives. And so you're going to be able to bring in texts that, are positive about DACA or things that are negative about DACA. And you can ask your students to compare and contrast the perspectives of the various authors.
Yes, good idea. Yeah. So We already talked about leveled texts, and I'm not sure we have time now to go back to the chat box to talk about those immigration pieces, but maybe what we could do is just, let me just quickly mention we are going to have a new call for articles available in February, and when students' writing is accepted for publication, they get $50. I don't know what the theme is going to be for the next issue yet, but it'll be up there on our website in February, and so please encourage your students to write for the magazine if they want. And what we could do is just take the next couple minutes to see if there's any last minute questions or comments, because I'd love to hear what they are.
Okay. There's a quick question from Thomas about the link to the website with the leveled articles from the change agent.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you can send me the URL, I will include that URL when I send out the PDF and the certificate.
Okay. Well, also right on this slide at the bottom where it says download the call for articles, that's our website right there.
And that has, once you go there, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, I think that the tab is in the classroom.
Okay. But I'll look it up too, and I'll add it in the email. Yeah, okay. So I think to follow up on Cynthia's kind of last point, we're really at the top of the hour, but other kind of pressing things that people would want to share in terms of ideas that you have for, how to include some of these materials in the classroom, again, to foster persistence, right? To go back to the main idea of thinking about a sense of community, a sense of purpose, a sense of agency and competence, all of these things helping students persist in their studies. And while you're thinking about this, I will also take this moment to announce two different things. I'm pleased to say that Cynthia is going to be the plenary speaker at this year's NJAL conference. So she's going to be joining us here in New Jersey in April. And then also be conducting a workshop at the conference. So you'll get a chance to meet her and talk with her face to face. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I mentioned this at the top of the hour, that NJAL is sponsoring a learner writing contest, which is relevant to what we've been discussing. And the announcement for that should be going out soon. We're going to be giving out prizes, cash awards, and also publishing a magazine of learner writings. And we're going to be asking for learners to participate and also for learners to sit on the evaluation committee. So hopefully once you get that email, you'll encourage some of your own students to submit their writings to the contest. And also if you have some students who you think would be particularly interested in evaluating and judging the submissions to the contest, that you would forward their names as well. Okay, any last minute thoughts or suggestions for kind of how to use this sort of material or build on these questions within the class? I think we've gotten a lot of good suggestions from people today about what they do in their own classrooms.
Yeah, and keep in mind, relevance is just one of the 6 drivers related to nurturing persistence in your program and in your classroom. And like many of the drivers, they do overlap often. So you find that when you're bringing in relevant material, you're also building community, you're also helping students get a sense of competence, and you're helping them have a sense of agency in their own lives and in the classroom. And many of those other drivers overlap with this relevance driver.
I think sometimes people get caught up in treating a heuristic as an actual model of something, like they're just supposed to be a helpful way to think about things. Like I know when we talk about vocabulary, for example, we often talk about a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary, right? So that tier 1 vocabulary words are things that we get, very easily: cat, dog, ball, that kind of stuff. And tier 2 are generalizable, but would still benefit from a little bit of instruction. And then tier 3 are really kind of discipline-specific words like photosynthesis and things like that. Right. And, so I've seen people very usefully think about the difference between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 words. And I've also seen people get bogged down thinking, is calculate tier 2 or tier 3? I'm like, it doesn't really matter. It's just supposed to help you think about the types of words that you're, bringing into the classroom and how you can, provide instruction around them. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Well, it seems like we're going to be able to wrap up now. So I'd like to thank Cynthia again for, I think, a really informative and insightful webinar. And I'd like to thank all of you for chiming in with your ideas.